Very early in his life, art was something that Lorne Lanning already had a huge knack for, and claims that it might have saved him from his rough upbringing. He began his career in the School of Visual Arts of New York City, while making and selling his own paintings. However, during the mid-80s, he noticed the rise of digital arts, and was inspired by Jack Goldstein after assisting him to enter that part of the media. He moved to California to study more technology-based art, visual effects, storytelling, etc., taking endless different roles of supervisor, manager, director, but one client would change his career forever. While working for Rhythm and Hues Studios in Hollywood, he met Sherry McKenna, a highly successful visual art producer who always had a determination to prove that things can be done on time and under budget. And according to Lanning, she was always focused and straight to the point, basically making things less chaotic and organized. Both Lanning and McKenna worked together for a virtual ride at Universal Studios Florida, and then eventually for Rhythm and Hues Studios. However, throughout the years, they felt their clients in the industry thought they knew better than the experts. So Lanning had an idea to get that creative control back. He also had a passion for video games during his study years, spending plenty of time in the arcades. His father was a ColecoVision engineer, and once he realized that the consoles were beginning to reach capabilities that allowed him to make the game he always envisioned, for the next couple of years, Lorne would ask Sherry to create a video game company with her, but would always refuse, having no knowledge or interest in the medium whatsoever. But after Lorne insisted that it was the right decision creatively and business-wise, as well as being able to fund it himself, McKenna eventually relented. So in 1994, they moved to San Luis Obispo and co-founded Oddworld Inhabitants. The original plan was to create a quintology of games with a different protagonist, which would be used to create a series of films. And the first one was called Soulstorm. It went through a couple of name changes throughout development, including Oddworld Inhabitants Episode 1, before finally settling with Oddworld Abe's Oddysee. It was backed by a $10 million marketing campaign by GT Interactive, which for a new IP created by new developers in the 90s was insane. But that demonstrated just how much faith people had in Abe, with incredible hype surrounding its unique art direction.
Hello.
The game was released for the PlayStation and PC on August 1997, and it was so successful that it spawned a whole franchise and a remake, new and tasty in 2014, and another one coming out next year. We're still waiting for that movie though. I, on the other hand, have never played an Oddworld game in my life. Well, okay, I've played the Game Boy version of this once, and because I was a little kid at the time, I was predictably rubbish at it. And if it weren't for a request by Carl Mackie Poltridge on Patreon, I wouldn't have even considered reviewing Abe's Oddysee. By the way, if you want to get your game suggestion reviewed on this channel along with a couple other rewards, then support on Patreon, the link is in the description. This means what you're looking at is rookie footage of Abe's Oddysee, so don't be surprised if this looks laughable. And if there's anything the sequel improves on, I'll mention them in future reviews of them if I like this game enough.
Follow me.
Sorry, we have to wait. To be fair, the loading times aren't bad in this game.
This is Rupture Farms. They say it's the biggest meat processing plant on Oddworld. I used to work here. Well, I was really a slave, like all the others.
The voice of the main protagonist, Abe, ladies and gentlemen, a Madokan who was Rupture Farms Employee of the Year.
Now I'm dead meat.
Why? Because one night when he was cleaning up, he overheard a meeting with the Glockens, who were frustrated over the recent decline in profits. CEO Muller comes up with a new meat product to bring them back up again. This was when Abe received the worst kind of twist.
It was us!
Terrified at this revelation, escape was all he could think of, so he had a destiny.
Get me out of here!
This relatable everyday character up against impossible odds certainly fits gameplay wise, because 95% of the time, you're completely defenseless without any means of fighting back. This isn't one of those platformers where you shoot, spin, or jump on enemies to kill them without even thinking about it. Instead, you rely on stealth, anticipation, and either avoiding or outsmarting the enemies into making a mistake. Whether it's sneaking, rolling, climbing up and down platforms, hiding in the darkness, and using bombs, rocks, meat, and telepathic powers. Everything has a different purpose, whether it's to take out an enemy, clear a way through, or to save a Mudokan. The latter is completely optional, with 99 scattered all over Rupture Farms, but I try to save as many as I can. It's based on other cinematic platformers like Prince of Persia, Another World, and Nosferatu. But thanks to graphical capabilities of the PlayStation, it's more polished than any other cinematic platformer that preceded it. For example, Abe's Oddysee is classified as a 2.5D game, and the character models are designed for 3D in mind, not pre-rendered like something out of Donkey Kong Country, which is why movement is so fluent on all sizes and depths of field, even in the distant background where you occasionally move around yourself. Some games at that time went for the in-game cutscenes like Metal Gear Solid, while others used live action with actors like the first Resident Evil. But with Oddworld, it was made by developers where art direction and computer animation were their specialties. And to use it prominently for storytelling set in a depressing Oddworld, and I say that in a good way, I mean look at the colors, shadows, sound effects, species, combined with a dark sense of humor to maintain balance. With the right use of 2D and 3D, it's barely aged. I'm playing this on the PlayStation so it looks a little bit muddier compared to the PC, but not to the point where even when you control Abe further in the background, you can't see what you're doing. Although occasionally it's hard to determine what you can and can't jump, or what's a wall and somewhere that leads to another area.
I had just got past those slugs when the strangest thing I saw. A big moon was before me.
After Abe escapes from the meat processing plant, he finds himself amongst a tribe of Mudokons, where the shaman, Big Head, revives and orders Abe to go back and free all the slaves back in the plant. But first enters a series of ritual trials where you learn additional mechanics and powers. It's more or less the same as trying to escape, but this is when you begin to see how much variety this game has. Throughout this part of the story and beyond, you'll also focus on certain commands, whether it's convincing Mudokons you're not a threat, oh pardon me, and these give you other telepathic powers to advance.
Hello, follow me. Okay.
If you grew up with this game, those words will be tattooed into your brain.
Hello, follow me. Okay.
I really love the interactions with the Mudokons. You hear all these evil voices when things become intense and these monsters which sound genuinely nasty. Suddenly you hear the Mudokons communicating, it feels sweet and innocent. You can make a machinima out of these.
Okay.
This part of the game from my perspective when Abe is undertaking these rituals is just to add gameplay time and not look at the same industrial meat processor for 10 hours. But as I explained with how it looks, what's wrong with that? But one thing that stays consistent is how enemies of all types never play around, because this game is hard, and will kill you hundreds of times like the slaughterhouse the Gluckons would have wanted. Fortunately, you have infinite lives and you can save at any time, but although it might appear self-explanatory at first, after a few minutes it'll frequently throw wrenches at you, whether it's deliberate enemy placement or a new mechanic to learn. And deaths are instant, including sleeks, explosives, wildlife, falling rocks, falling damage. Seriously, is there anything that doesn't kill you? And because movement is fluent and checkpoints are mostly scarce, whenever you die, you have to painstakingly perform the same long routine until you get it right, waiting in the correct position, slowly climb platforms, only to miss time entering a tunnel. That's usual routine. You need thick skin to survive through it all. And the main cause of this, at least when I played it, is the appallingly delayed controls. This is the headache that for a brief period caused me to completely write the whole game off as a broken, outdated insanity test, motivating me to never play another Oddworld title again. Kind of like how I felt about the original Mortal Kombat a few years ago, which some didn't take too kindly to. The first instance of my frustration for the controls was trying to climb the platforms while running. What I would do is run, stop, then climb up, but with the Scrab close by, it clearly didn't work. Until after probably a dozen attempts, I found out that you can jump while running and grab onto the ledge at the same time. It also took me a while to figure out how to run and go straight into a roll. If I didn't learn these moves sooner, I wouldn't have reached far in this game. Okay, fine. In these cases, you live and learn. However, when I entered a secret area that required running from one side to the other while being chased by a Scrab and trying to leap past separate platforms, I swear, unless you played this game your whole life, it's luck-based. You don't just press the jump button on the edge, but a space or two in advance, which is very difficult to time, especially when the next platform to leap past is on the other side of the screen. Sometimes I jump too early, sometimes I clear it, and mostly I just fall to my death. It's the same story when entering these tunnels. If you mistime it, you just stop. and become a Mudokan Pop. Let's just say I'm not a fan of the stages you're watching right now. You see the trend? It's trying to perform an action while running. That's honestly the only thing I hate about this game. And that's a very short list, if you can even call it one. But because checkpoints are usually low, it never went away. Even if I knew exactly what to do, every attempt I felt that sense of uncertainty whether if I'm gonna make it or not, and not in the right way. If you watch my reviews on this channel, you'll know that I rate control above anything else in most games. They'll either make or break the experience. This comes very close to breaking it. You beg to fight back. I'm surprised by the revelation, because I thought it would be the trial and error cycle that would bother me the most, but honestly it doesn't, because most of the time when the death is a result of an ill-advised move, not delayed control timing, it's usually funny, like, whoops. This game loves to throw you into traps, giving you the false impression of what to do, but when you think outside the box, you'll get a aha moment, all without being confusing to the point of needing a walkthrough. I suppose it does get a little repetitive, like the processes for dealing with certain enemies don't change, but by the time you reach the third act, the difficulty curve in terms of puzzle solving becomes more challenging. There are more explosives to jump past, more how eyes trying to stop you from controlling sligs, killing enemies will trigger more alarms, you need to make use of the slags. But once you advance past that bit that you'll replay dozens of times, it feels so satisfying. The level design throughout the whole game is excellent, actually. However, going back to saving the Mudokons, the number you free will affect the ending. To avoid spoiling it, all I'm gonna say is that you have to free at least 50 to get the good ending. Otherwise, you'll be presented with something that's taken out of a Ghouls and Ghosts title, and sent back to around 2/3 into the story. I wouldn't be surprised if anyone who played it for the first time, suffering through all that punishment only to get the bad ending, would have stayed away from this game for days, maybe even weeks or months out of sheer fury. To be fair, you don't have to play the entire game again, and you would already know how to do pretty much every puzzle up to that point. And when you do decide to start all over again a second time, you'll have this new motivation to save all 99. Even the tutorial part teaching you the basic commands, for example. If you already know how to control Abe, and have a sixth sense of the enemy placement and all the traps, you'll find more than meets the eye compared to your first attempt, further adding to the clever level design of this game. Point is, it'll take a fraction of the previous attempt to beat it, and if you didn't get the good ending before, trust me, you will on the second attempt. Oddworld Abe's Oddysee is definitely a good game. In fact, it's one of the best on the PlayStation. I'm surprised. But I also warn you viewers to play at your own risk, because it's certainly not for the short-tempered, which means I have a love-hate relationship with it. I mean, having to start again because the controls fail you, that's one of my biggest pet peeves in video games next to AI rubber banding and no continues. Should be anyone's, to be honest. You'll go through phases when you'll play for around an hour, and others where you can't go longer than 10 minutes. In fact, every single time I stopped playing this game, it was a result of rage quitting. But for the most part, Abe's Oddysee is challenging in the right way. If hard games are what you like, it's an easy recommendation. At the very least, I'll give them benefit of the doubt for being the first game the developers made. Will I review the rest of this series? I don't know yet. Let me know in the comments section. Well, the game says I will. Who knows?